speech and lecture you sort of gave us. I don't know what to call it because we give lectures all the time, but none can be as engrossing as yours. So, the first thing that occurred to me when I was listening to you is uh, how you began with the power of uh, myths over arguments. And, we are a university. So the great thing about university is we have different schools next to each other. We have the School of Liberal Arts sitting right opposite to the School of Business. And so there's this healthy contestation about how to approach knowledge and life between these schools. And, uh, you are very popular among the business management crowd. And in a strange way, we see you as an ambassador of the liberal arts within the business management. And, the way in which you have brought back what it means to read stories, to interpret them, to debate them. So the thing that occurred to me is, could you tell us a little bit about what you read apart from mythology and, how that informs, your
Yeah.
worldview?
So, the easiest way is rather than me just telling you what I read, I also don't remember what I read. So I'm opening my Kindle, right? And the easiest way to see that in order to write well in mythology, what are the subjects you are supposed to read? So here is my Kindle. And so the first book deals with history. The second book deals with the history of Buddhism. So lots of books on Buddhism. Then there is a book on linguistics by Peggy Mohan. Then there is a book on the Vedas by Fritz Stahl. Then there is fiction. Then there is again history. There is books on Jainism. Then there is book on poetry. Then there is book on business management. Then there is the biography of some 2 or 3 very rich and powerful people. So you have to read all kinds of subjects. Like I will read fiction, non-fiction. I want to read, genetics. I want to understand genetics. I want to understand biology. Yesterday I was discussing with someone hive behavior. So you have to understand botany. You have to understand zoology. Because the more you ultimately you want to understand about life. Whether you're talking about business is a part of life. Arts is a part of life. None of them complete life entirely. You need to know a little bit about everything. Rabindranath Tagore had made the sentence that education is knowing something about everything and everything about something. And I follow that definition. I had read this definition when I was in school. You should know something about everything and everything about something. So I think when you read subjects from around the world and draw connections and parallels, you are able to live a better life and a fuller life. So that's what I do. In the early stages of your career, you're focused on making money. So you're like, okay, I have to get a job, so I'll work hard, I'll go to my tuition classes. But now I go back to the textbooks I read and I read them very differently because I don't have the burden anymore of earning a livelihood. That's a phase in your life when you want to earn a livelihood and you want to take care of your family. Once that phase, you reach a stage where you're comfortable, then you start to expand your thoughts and you amplify and you start reading on other topics. So that's what I read. I read almost every subject that I can lay my hands on.
Thanks a lot. So I think we'll take that input generally to, to sort of have this liberal arts inflection on the study of business strengthen. So, another thing which I wanted to sort of take forward from what you have done over the years, as you say, you prefer the power of stories over the power of arguments. And I thought that was a very powerful point for us in general. Because in any case, I would say more than a storyteller, you are an interpreter of stories. An interpreter of myths. A myth is interpreted to tell a new story. And what I would like to know is that there's a certain boldness with which you interpret them. I was reading about this nice term that you coined. It's called applied mythology,
Yeah.
So I have, for me, the thing that I would like to ask you that because, being in liberal arts school, liberal arts, liberty, freedom is a very essential virtue for us. But the question is, when we have the freedom to interpret, but how do we stories any way we want? But how do we interpret a story with the kind of novelty and coherence as you have done? So,
See, the question is, are you interested in other people's points of view at all? So many a times, see, everybody can interpret anything. So what is called anything goes. But when I see the globally, even when you use the word liberal, what does liberal mean? What it means in the Western world is coming out of individualism. And individualism is part of Greek mythology. It's not global mythology. So our problem is we are given to assume that Western mythology is global mythology. It's not true. So what is liberalism? Freedom to do whatever I want is an individualistic idea. It is a reaction to collectivism, which is part of biblical mythology, which is also Western. So when you look at the Western world, you need to understand that there is a conflict between the Greek way of thinking, which is individualistic, and the biblical way of thinking, which is collective. This liberal, but in India, you have another word for liberalism or liberal. It's called moksha, freedom. It is much older than, now where do you locate moksha in liberal arts? Because liberalism is freedom to do what I want versus, so liberty in society. Moksha is liberty from society. Now, will your liberal arts students learn about moksha? Is moksha part, now when you talk about moksha, now that's a very different way of now. Is moksha taught in liberal arts schools in other parts of the world? So what has happened is, unfortunately, the university system is tilted towards valorizing Western ideas. Only now people are questioning it. Oh, there is other ways of thinking. The Chinese think very differently. The Confucian thinking is different. Taoist thinking is different. Hindu thinking is different. Jain thinking is different. Buddhist thinking is different. So these Greek and biblical models that shape the world are creating conflict because they're both in odds with each other. And that's the thing. So when you talk about liberal arts, it's about liberty. But what do we mean by liberty? Is my liberty at the cost of your liberty acceptable? Because most Western ideas are very isolationist, my way or the highway. It is not relationship driven. Because the individual and the collective does not talk in terms of relationship. It doesn't talk about 2 people in the room, 4 people in the room. It talks about the tribe or it talks about the person. So group versus individual. But between the group and the individual, there's something called like a people. And now people are using words like network. But even that does not draw attention to 2 people talking. Upanishads is 2 people talking. You have ideas, I have ideas. This is not part of Western thought. They will only talk of 2 people talking in terms of Hegel, and it all comes down to argument, and ultimately it comes down to one truth. They are not comfortable with multiple truths existing. Only now they are talking about diversity and plurality for the last 10 years. Indians have been diverse. We have no choice. We have to deal with diversity for the last hundreds of years. We have never been homogeneous. We hate homogeneity. Diversity and inclusion is a business world has come only what? 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Nobody talked about it before. Why? Because it didn't make business sense. The moment your businesses started spreading across Europe and America to China and India and Vietnam, and you have to deal with people from other parts of the world, now you started thinking about diversity and inclusion. So it is not an innocent idea. It is sudden discovery that, oh, I have to think of other people also. But basically, Western thought thinks there's only one truth in the world. And when there's one truth in the world, there'll only be argument. But the moment you accept there are multiple truths in the world, you will not argue. You will listen. You will accommodate. You will adapt. You will figure out a way of engaging. And that's the problem. When you have a business school and a liberal arts school, we are being competitive. Why? Why are you being competitive? Who are you trying to defeat and win? This obsession with winning, I want to win, I want to defeat, I want to be triumphant, is a very old and outdated idea. It is very militaristic. And we should, I mean, it's a choice. You want to be a military person, but there are other options out there. You don't have to be a competitive Bakasura.
Thanks for that input, because I think that leads me well into the next question I want to ask you. You talk about this consistently between what you have called the Western approach to knowledge and the Indian approach. And to me, one thing in which we can sort of have this distinction bear upon is the world of design. And I bring that up because, yesterday it occurred to me when I was just rereading your books, the kind of thought that goes into illustrating your books. This is something that probably not been stressed upon, but I think you are an excellent illustrator of your own stories. And teaching illustration, animation is going to be one of the central, points of focus for our design school. And for us, when we are going about thinking about the school, the first thing that we notice is that within the study of illustration and design, there is this divide between technical knowledge and conceptual vision. So there may be some people who may know very good Photoshop, who may draw very well, but they don't have the artistic vision or the philosophical vision to make that harmony between, their technical ability and a certain view of the world. So to us, I don't know if that comes from an Indian school of thinking, the way in which you have become such a wonderful illustrator of your work. So your books are this complete package. You don't hire a book cover illustrator to design your books or your, illustrations. So could you tell us something about this design thinking that goes into your thought?
So design thinking is basically when you pay attention to the hunger of the consumer. That's design thinking. There's nothing else in design thinking. Engineer does not think of the consumer. The moment you start thinking about the consumer, you become a designer. So that's the difference between a designer and an engineer. Right? An engineer, in a way, works in a vacuum. He knows the mathematics, he knows the problem, he solves the problem. He's not concerned with the consumer. If you understand the consumer, that means you're doing darshan. You are looking at other person's truth. So when I am asking myself when I'm writing a book, when someone enters a bookshop and sees so many books, how will he pick up my book? Right? So I begin with designing the spine of the book. I spend a lot of time designing the spine of the book. Then he pulls out the book. What is the first thing he's going to do? He's going to turn and look at the front cover, but really he's going to look at the back cover. So then I have to put that. It is possible that someone doesn't know my name, but remembers my face from television. So I will put my photograph. So everything has a thought. Everything has a idea. When you're reading a book, I will say that, okay, how is the table of contents designed? How is the people have attention deficit disorder now. Everybody likes Instagram. I am competing with a world which is like, why would anybody want to read a heavy book? So you make the text small, you give illustrations, you give diagrams, you explain Ramayana and Mahabharata using tables and flow charts, which you see in science books. So you startle people and you say that, I can teach you Shiva and Parvati using a flow chart and a table and a bullet points. So I brought bullet points to mythology. So from PowerPoint presentation to so what you have to do is I'm looking at the audience continuously and I'm like, okay, this person will understand this. A child will understand that. International audience wants this. So all my books, my consumer is present in my room. Without them, when I'm giving a lecture, I'm very aware of the audience. I'm not just sharing my thought. It is like, in India, there's this concept, when you're cooking food, how much salt to add. And they will say, swadanusar. But the designer will say, kiske swadanusar? Pakane wale, the one who cooks, or the one who eats? How do you put salt? Based on what your need or the need of if the person in front of you has blood pressure, you will not put salt. Right? So you have to, the design thinking is when you think of other people, and that's why all my work is, I'm very aware of my consumer. And that's what I've done. I know my subject. I'm very happy with my subject. I don't need the subject. I'm writing for people, not for myself.
So, yeah.
Good morning. My name is V. Seshu. Just wanted to know few things. Like whenever you start writing, you think and write. So what is the wavelength?
Can you hold the mic up so it's clear?
What is the wavelength that the thinkers needs to think? Depth or near to the point?
So I follow a principle which is, it's a neurobiological principle. You have to have a bird's eye view and a worm's eye view. So I spend a lot of time, before I write a book, I'll spend a lot of time writing the blurb of the book, which is what is the purpose of the book. Then I will spend a lot of time in structuring the book, because I think from a perspective. Then I go into focus. Once I have defined the design of the book, and I spend hours and maybe months designing a book, and then writing the book is very fast, because once I've designed the book, it's like designing a cupboard. You design a cupboard, you design which shelves, which is first shelf, second shelf, third shelf, which are the files, and then you start filling it up slowly and slowly and slowly while you're doing your research at the same time. So focus and perspective, these are two words that you need to have. Our right brain likes perspective and our left brain loves focus. And you have to think both. So I spend a lot of time with the table of content, and so I function that way. Yep.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yes.
So may I have the next question up?
देवदत्त पटनायक सर, नमस्ते। मैं आपके लेखनी की बहुत बड़ी प्रशंसक हूँ और आप मिथ के राइटर हैं और मैं हिंदी की प्रोफेसर। मैं अपना प्रश्न और आपका जवाब हिंदी में ही जानना चाहूँगी। पहला प्रश्न ये है कि आपने लिखा प्रिंसेस ऑफ पी, 10 गद्दे के नीचे भी अगर मटर आ जाता है तो वो सो नहीं पाती। आपको क्या लगता है कि भारतीय महिलाओं में और प्रिंसेस ऑफ पी में क्या अंतर है और क्या समानता है?
देखिए, मैं हिंदी में भी दूंगा और अंग्रेजी में भी दूंगा, because everybody has to understand.
Yes,
yeah? So, आजकल, पहले I'll give in Hindi and then I'll explain Hindi. So, I always tell that we have two points of view. कुछ लोग ओवर सेंसिटिव होते हैं, छोटी छोटी बातों का भतंगड़ बना देते हैं, उनको मैं राजकुमारी मटरी बोलता हूँ, प्रिंसेस एंड द पी, जिसको एक मटर से भी तकलीफ होता है। बट हमारे शास्त्रों में एक दूसरे प्रकार की महिला भी है, जो है राजकुमारी ज्वाला, जो हु स्टैंड्स इन फायर, हु वॉक्स इन फायर एंड इज नॉट इवन फायर डजंट बर्न हर। तो हमको ये डिसाइड करना है, वी हैव टू डिसाइड वेदर वी वांट टू बी द ओवर सेंसिटिव प्रिंसेस मटरी or the resilient Princess Jwala. I prefer being Princess Jwala. I don't like being Princess Matri, but good poetry comes out of being Princess Matri. Because जब आप oversensitive होती हो, when you're very oversensitive, you write very good poetry. Because हर दर्द के बारे में आप लिखते हो. If you are resilient, you won't write good poetry. You need that pain. शोक से श्लोक निकलता है. So from pain comes poetry. So if you want to write good poetry, you have to be a little Princess Matri. But if you want to sell your books, you have to become Princess Jwala.
Yeah, thank you. We have, the last question. Please go on, sir. Yeah.
Congratulations, Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik, and I really appreciated the way you introduced mythology and other things. My question is this. I'm sure all others want to be read and many people to read the books and things like that. But why is it's so difficult for many of us to be very concerned about what the consumer really needs and change ourselves to suit his needs?
See, if you want to understand marketing, you must understand the Tawaif culture of India. So the Tawaifs were the courtesans of India. They have been wiped out of Indian history. the Tawaf had no marketing skills except her voice. She would sing in order to attract people to her chamber. If you want people to read what you have written, you have to be sensitive to what they are hungry for. If you are not willing to change yourself, you are writing for yourself, which is good. But don't expect others to like what you write. It's like cooking food. I love to cook Chinese food, but everyone in my house wants to eat Kannadiga food. I can make as many noodles as I want, but they will say, we want bisi bele bhat. Now what do? Either you change or they change. One of you all has to change if the relationship has to work. Maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday you can make noodles. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday you can make bisi bele bhat. But you have to change, otherwise relationships won't work. You have a relationship with your consumer. Everybody won't like your work, but some consumers will like your work, and you have to decide for whom are you writing. A relationship between a writer and a reader is very important. So I'll say so what happens, many writers are very brilliant. They write what they want to write, but in the process, they capture the needs of the consumer. It's just that they are not aware of it. They are not aware they're capturing the needs of it. But when you start analyzing their work, you realize they're capturing the needs. They may not be aware of it at that time. We will use words like authentic for them. See, we don't like the Tawaf. In our minds, someone who enchants, now we'll say Mohini we don't like. We don't like Urvashi, Rambha, Mohini. But even God has to become Mohini, in order to make people happy. So, little dancing and singing is required to make your customer happy. Yeah.
Thank you, Devdutt. I know we'd like to continue this fascinating conversation, but we need to stop it at a certain point in time because of paucity of time. May I now request Pro-Chancellor Mr. Abhay Chebi and Vice-Chancellor Dr. Anuba to come up on stage to felicitate Devdutt and for this, for the wonderful time that he's given us with a fascinating conversation. Yeah, round of applause, guys. Yeah, thank you. Round of applause, folks.